Welcome to Happy Homes and Gardens. My name is Daphne Royce. I'm your host. I am a real estate broker, architecture, and interior designer. Gamelatron is the world's first fully robotic gamelan orchestra. Taylor Kuffner, who is an electronic music producer, worked with sculpture and song. His standalone Gamelatron artwork with other projects have exhibited many continents throughout the world. John Hart Taylor is the co-founder of LumiGeek, who use LED technology to create artistic display in the US and Europe. Aaron and John worked together to create the one-of-a-kind experience in Gamelatron and LED phenomenon. Good morning, John and Aaron. How are you today?
Morning. How are you?
Doing well. Please tell us who you are and what you do.
Shall we go alphabetical?
Yeah, take it away.
I know, double A, I'm always first alphabetical.
Yep.
My name is Aaron Taylor Kuffner. I'm a multidisciplined artist, and I make sonic kinetic sculptures. So that's sculptures that make sound and that also move. One of my best known projects is called Gamelatron, where I'm inspired by the Indonesian tradition of gamelan, which I studied for a long time and lived in Indonesia studying. And I retrofit them with mechanical mallets and create these sound producing sculptures where it's almost like a player piano, except instead of the mallets striking the strings of a piano, it's these kind of modernist sculptures that are being that are utilizing bronze, hand-forged bronze gongs usually as the piano strings, if you will. And I make these kind of ghostly musical automatons.
How about you, John?
All right. My name's John Taylor, and I'm a creative technologist and artist. I've spent a large portion of my life supporting other artists with various technologies, software, hardware, just custom solutions, some CAD design, and just, really helping, various people that have inspired me kind of grow their artistic practice by infusing a little bit of technology into their world. And that's actually how I met Aaron, was a very kind of early injection of custom software to help the Gamelatron project evolve from being originally kind of a residency project with a lemur, the League of Electronic Musical Urban Robots, Eric Singer's project. And me and my business partner in LumiGeek, we provided some custom software and hardware that helped the project kind of evolve and grow in some pretty interesting ways. And that was how we met quite some time ago. And it's been wonderful to work with Aaron, and now we are collaborating together as artists. And yeah, you've seen the results of that collaboration now. So that's sort of what I do.
So how long have you two known each other? And how did you start to cooperate?
I've known each other for about, I guess, 12 years or so, something like that. And I think the collaboration really started on different levels. So in the beginning, it was John and his partner Jojo really looking at what I was doing and saying, you know what, this could be done better. There's other kind of creative technological solutions that could be implemented, and they happen to have the unique skill set in order to do that. John as like a software engineer and knowing a lot about interactive technology and things like that, and Jojo as a hardware engineer and knowing a lot about the nuts and bolts of like printed circuit boards and how to make your own physical computing systems and such. And so it started out that way, as they were kind of technological support for my artistic project. And then it evolved because, John, especially a very creative guy, and he started thinking about his own kind of visual mediums and ways in which he could kind of interpret the songs that I was creating on the Gamelatron, and how that we could share the same data sets and create, one would create as a sonic presentation of it, and the other could make a visual presentation of it. And it's just kind of like a natural progression over time as he got to know the project more and more intimately. There was this kind of creative fusion between some of the things that he was exploring and how the two could relate to each other, using similar data sets in order to kind of drive his LED sculptures.
So Aaron, you haven't lived in Indonesia. What got you involved in making gongs and gamelatron?
Yeah, in hindsight, it looks all lined up just perfectly. But of course, that's not the way the world really works. I think that's the challenge of life in order to be able to look back at the things that you've done and synthesize them into your present and your future. So I was in Indonesia not knowing exactly why I was there. Or I wouldn't say not knowing why, but I didn't have a big vision for the experience. I was just experiencing things. And I got really attracted to the traditional art form known as gamelan. And I enrolled in a university there called the Institute Seni Indonesia in Yogyakarta. And while I was there, I got more and more interested in the actual gongs themselves that they would use usually for cultural, traditional, spiritual practices. And in my investigation, I wanted to know how they were made. And so I kind of took it upon myself to learn that and to hang out with different gong makers and this very niche industry of gong makers, many of them for multi generations. And then when I came back to America, and specifically New York, that's where I'm based, I didn't know what I would do with this kind of abstract knowledge. But of course, you paint with the colors that are on your palette. So I painted metaphorically with the experiences that I had had and the things that I knew. And that was the beginning of taking this other component of, let's say, sculpture, where seeing these gongs and building these ways for them to hang in these kind of beautiful modernist wall-mounted and freestanding sculptures, but then also thinking about how they could be played beyond just by people, but the technological side of it, and was also influenced by the people who had done similar things. John mentioned Eric Singer, who had an array of kind of robotized percussion instruments. And that was the beginning of saying, oh, well, if we take this element of technology and this element of sculpture and this element of sound, and then incorporating all these different elements together in order to create this kind of unique, original hybrid. But when I was studying, I didn't know that's what I'd do with it. I was just kind of following the things that I was attracted to and trying to learn from them.
Do you know what's the biggest country making gong in Asia?
Well, a lot of different places in Asia make gongs. There's a lot of distinctions if you want to get like very ethnomusicologists like. Most gongs would probably be in the percussion field be considered tam-tams. And that's actually like plate, you know, the kind of like circular plates where you can hit in different places and it makes this kind of splattering of different sounds, like the gong show, or you think of a kind of Chinese gongs, things like that. In Indonesia specifically, they have a boss in the middle of the gong, which is used to tune it. And they try to make the entire gong make one primary note, unlike, let's say, a tam-tam, which is, or a cymbal or something like that, which is going to splatter different notes across a wider spectrum and not be really as tuned for a specific note. So gamelan is like a tuned percussion, closer to say like maybe xylophones and things like that, and they use their gongs in the same way. So there are some distinctions and unique things about all over Asia that have different kinds of gongs, and not just in Asia. I mean, there's a great tradition in Russia of like plates. They're like metal plates, and I think humans in general are attracted to reverberation, resonance, and feel a affinity and a connection to these different kinds of like vibrating sonic objects, and that's why they're part of our culture. And it reflects the ideals of those cultures, how they're played or how they're made or what context they're used for. And so the Indonesian ones that I was influenced by is at this point, I think, more coincidental. It doesn't have to be about Indonesia at all, and what I'm doing is not. It's more about humans interacting with resonance and having these intentional sound experiences in their lives and in their diet. And I was exposed to Indonesia, so I use that and have like that background. But I'm trying to do something that's more universal. And when we really look at culture in general, the use of sound in people's lives, be it for spiritual reasons or community reasons or just to be part of their diet, I think we see a lot more consistencies, maybe different interpretations or different ways of doing it. But it is something that I think makes us grow, heal, and become a better person.
So what are your guns made of and where they made it from? Are they make it locally in the US or they actually make it somewhere else?
Yeah, all over. Most of the gongs, and you'll see some behind me and you've seen some before, they're made of copper and tin. It's usually recycled copper. It can be pipe, it can be wire, it can be anything. Sometimes it's even scrap. We go to scrap yards and we melt down things that have copper in it. And we separate out the copper. And then tin is harder to find now because there's not as much conventional use for tin. So a lot of times we have to buy ingots of tin rather than being able to scrap it. But it's like 10 parts copper and 3 parts tin usually. The great thing about that, and the reason why the Bronze Era was the Bronze Era, is because they have about the same melting point. So you can create an alloy of bronze by melting the two together in the same pot, which is a lot easier than making a lot of the other metallic alloys. And that's the way they've been doing it for 1,000 years. And it's kind of poured out into a pancake, like a thick pancake. And then through a process of reheating and pounding it and reheating and pounding and reheating and pounding over and over again, we create its shape and we make the molecular structure more compact, and you essentially create the gong depending on its size and its thickness and different parts that are raised or flattened. You can create different tones, and then series of different tones together to create kind of like a scale or your own sonic palette or universe. I work with a couple different teams. Some people that I worked with when I lived in Indonesia, some that I've made new relationships with. A lot of them are in Surakarta, which is a city in central Java in Indonesia. I also make some here, depending on travel times and abilities and what facilities I have available to me. I've also explored using more tensile metals like steel, and using sheet steel and forming it, sometimes welding bronze parts to it, especially when I'm trying to make oversized pieces, when I'm trying to make gongs that are 4 feet and larger that create really low resonance. Most of those I make here out of my studio. So it's probably that those are the two. It's between my studio and we do a lot of the hot forging in Indonesia, and then I ship them back to me, and then I do the cold forging and the tuning and the surface finishing here once we've already have the primary shape.
I believe I heard 4 different metals that you just mentioned it. Copper, tin, bronze, and steel. Do they make it different notes, different sound from different materials?
Sure. So a little distinction. Copper plus tin equals bronze. So bronze is an alloy, which means alloys just means it's made from multiple metals. Now, modern day bronze can be made of, the only ingredient that you have to have for bronze really is copper. So now there's a lot of what they call red metals, which is like any metal, any alloy that has copper in it. So brass would be another one. Traditional bronze, which is what these gongs are made of, is copper and tin because they melt at roughly the same point. So they're the easiest ones to make. So that if you wanted to melt them together, you just put them together, heat them together, and then cool them together. Whereas like most other more complicated alloys, you'd have to heat each metal individually to the same melting point and then have like a much more sophisticated combining system and stuff. And that's why the Bronze Era was kind of like our first of the alloy eras in human history. So copper plus tin equals bronze. And then steel is actually an alloy too of iron and carbon. And steel just has more tensile strength, meaning that it can like not snap, like it can be really long and it'll bend rather than snap, and it'll keep its strength. Bronze, on the other hand, is pretty rigid. So if it's really long, it'll hold a lot of strength, but then if you push too hard, you're not going to get a lot of give. It's just going to like snap. So what happens is with smaller gongs, I make them all out of bronze. But with the larger gongs, where they have to kind of support their own weight across like bigger and bigger space, I've moved to using steel because it's a little more forgiving in being able to bow. And the steel works a lot easier for me to do here in my facility, whereas a lot of the bronze work, especially for just forging, like heating up the metal and then pounding it into shape, I do it in the traditional way with a team in Surakarta, Central Java, and with a team whose father did it, and their father's father did, and their father's father did it. So there's still like a legacy connection there.
Why are there so many different sizes of gongs?
The bigger the gong, usually the deeper the pitch in general. So depending on what kind of sound you want to make and what pitch range, think about this. If you opened up a piano, right? The high keys all the way on your right side. If you opened up the piano, you'd see that they were very small strings, short strings, I mean, and usually thinner. But as you get to the deeper and deeper ones, these are longer and longer strings and they're thicker. So that would be analogous to the gongs, where the smaller and smaller gongs make higher and higher pitches. The deeper and deeper notes are going to be bigger gongs. And there's other factors that go into that as well. But without weighing you down in like the specifics of gong making, that's probably the most obvious of what kind of pitch you're going to get. Think about bells and things like that too. It's usually like the smaller the ones, the higher the pitch, the bigger the ones, the deeper.
Each gong makes one note. Am I correct?
It makes one primary note in this kind of gamelan tradition because they have this raised knob in the middle of the gong. And so that kind of focuses the entire body of the gong around like really resonating this one note that it's tuned to. Now, a gong from China, for instance, let's say a tam tam, depending on where you hit that plate, it's going to make different notes, but it usually doesn't make a very focused note. It's kind of more of this splattering kind of note. So this is just a different concept where you really tune this knob, and then the entire gong, if you strike it on that knob where it's kind of intended to be struck, it really focuses the entire surface around making that sound. And truth is, there's actually a lot more than one note in there. There's these overtones and undertones, and if you looked at the actual note in like a spectrometer or something, you would see that it's not like a perfect waveform, but rather it's, has these different fragmented sound waves. And that helps create like this really unique character, unlike, let's say, a sine wave synthesizer. So it has this still like very organic and unique properties, even though it might play one specific note, it has a lot of character to it beyond just what that primary note would be. And that's also gets into what's so unique and fun about them and different from, let's say, playing a piano, which would have much more pure sound waves, sine waves, meaning that they wouldn't really deviate far from their primary note.
If someone wants to get a set of a Gamelatron from you, they can do the smaller set with the few gongs. Would they make a differences for the music they play?
Okay, well, the quick steps is like this. I do make some pieces and I sell them. And that'd be just like buying any other sculpture, except this one also makes sound. And I usually compose songs for those sculptures. And then usually have some kind of button array built into the sculpture, or an app in which you can choose which songs to play, or you could set a schedule, kind of like setting an alarm on your phone, except instead this will play different songs at different times of day or turn them off. Most of the time, though, I'm working very site specifically. So someone might have a home or a garden in which they want one of these artworks in it. And then I would work with the design of that space, both physically and sonically. And then I create an artwork that is kind of hand in glove for that environment. And then I do site responsive composing, meaning that I'm like a band that might make an album and then when they get on stage, they want to sound like the album. I don't do that. I instead come on site and I write the music based on the use cases and the intention of that space. So if it's in a garden, for instance, I'm listening to what are the ambient sounds in the garden? What kind of birds are coming? What kind of insects? What time of day? And then I use these other sounds in order to kind of incorporate into what I'm creating. And I create these kind of ambient soundscapes that are really thinking about how is this going to best serve the people, the humans, those that are living in that space. And really, it's like a very bespoke composing project, and no two pieces are the same, and no two compositions are the same, and even the scales that I'm using will be different. It's not like a standardized do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do, but rather I'll create these kind of sonic universes the same way that an artist might have a palette that has red and orange and yellow on it, but it's not necessarily a primary red, orange, and yellow. They have all these nuances, and then that creates relationships between that red and that orange. The same way I'm doing that with sound, creating these like unique relationships between these like specially tuned instruments. And then that also jurisdicts like how they create their picture, if you will, like how they create that song will be based on their unique relationship between these subtly different notes.
Very interesting.
Yeah. But it's very bespoke, in part to my own detriment, because now it means I can only make a few a year. So I try to pick my projects really wisely and things that I like feel really inspired and engaged by, and also try to work with people that, want this in their life and want to honor it and share it. And so it means that there's usually a lot of direct interaction between me and the people who are going to have this in their life, because ultimately I'm serving them. This is something that like is here to edify them. And so my job as an artist in this case is to be as potent as possible within the parameters that we think are going to be best in this situation.
And I understand John is doing an LED display. John, how did you find your LED display that can cohesively flow with the Gamelatron music?
Well, the LED displays are very custom in the sense that the shapes of the LEDs are rather unique. As you can see behind me, it's kind of a very like long aspect ratio display. So that's something that I actually really had to design myself and get kind of the smallest components possible to wire up into a custom display. It's the same type of technology that you might see for a freeway billboard or maybe even a big video wall at a music festival like Coachella, but those are very specific modules that are usually big squares that all kind of quickly go together and turn into a big giant display that's really meant to show pictures. So my exploration with this LED technology has been to really focus on the individual LEDs and to try to display patterns that really kind of have like an organic and natural feeling to them. So something that's going to very much resonate with our parasympathetic nervous system, where for some reason, the wind blowing leaves and trees or the ripples that are in a pond, these are all things that are incredibly soothing and calming to humans, and this is just because of our natural evolution. So to try to reflect that back to the viewer using a digital technology, it can be a bit challenging, and that's really where I've tried to focus my journey with this art form is to try to come up with very natural feeling patterns, but use modern technology to bring them to the viewer. And then that opens up the possibility of being able to synchronize those patterns with the compositions of the Gamelatron.
I think math is also really part of it too, where I know that when John first started thinking about this, it was very much so about nature, but it was also about the same way that we can interpret certain aspects of nature through like mathematical algorithms and things like that. And that there's this great kind of meeting. It's kind of like the Fibonacci sets or like fractals and things like that, you know, where you have this like meeting between like physics and science with the natural world, and it all of a sudden like you realize that like math doesn't happen in a vacuum, but rather like, you know, happens all around us. And I think that there's this thing that John is doing where he's using algorithms in order to kind of describe the way in which like things move the same way they would, let's say, in nature, and then creating like these series of rules that allow the sounds themselves to be the wind, you know, to like create that instance. And so it's this great hybrid fusion of both, you know, technology, pure mathematics, but also with an eye towards like working with nature in a way.
John, I can see you have the LED display panels behind you and also the Gamelatron. Do you mind if you can turn that on for maybe like 30 seconds? Listener can kind of experiment of what we was talking about.
Okay, I could do that. Let's see here. I'll move out of the way. So. Okay.
We have videos that we can share with you.
It's very soothing. I think I can hear that whole day long.
Yeah.
So John, is there a popular LED screens people preferred? Elongated, like what you have, or you made it different shapes?
I've been really enjoying this long aspect ratio. It makes me think about like reflecting ponds, you know, where it's just like a long and skinny kind of form factor. And as far as the size of the LED and the spacing, this is a 2mm LED pitch. You can have like, you know, bigger spacing and bigger LEDs, so it's more like they're individual dots. But this 2mm spacing I find very interesting because it's sort of right on the edge of being able to manipulate individual dots, but then when you stand far enough away, it's amazing just how much your brain fills in the in-between, kind of the negative space, the little gaps in between the LEDs. It kind of flirts with going back and forth from you know, kind of 8-bit individual pixels, but then it kind of melts together as you start to visually relax your eyes and becomes more of like a cohesive, almost like video or photo quality to it. And so I really like kind of flirting with and experimenting with going in and out of those two modalities by way of this particular LED spacing.
This question is for both of you. So what is the most challenging part of your work?
Oh boy. I'd say for me, it is the context switching from one side of the brain to the other, because there's a very technical part of the work that I create, where I'm creating these custom digital canvases. That's where I tend to use a lot of structure, and I'm really thinking of it in terms of geometry and hard shapes. And then I like to switch, but sometimes the context switch to go into the artistic mode where I just really sit with the visual end result, and all the while I'm getting that result by writing custom software. So there's quite a bit of bouncing back and forth between hemispheres of the brain, and so it's really just kind of trying to balance those two tasks and make sure that I really do get a chance to sit with the artwork using kind of both sides of my thinking.
It's funny because that's like my favorite part, because I fall into a similar category where it's like, I spend more time, people don't realize it, because when you see like a finished piece, the thing that you're experiencing is more like the sound or the end game visual presentation. But as far as the actual fabrication, like, I mean, I'm bending every piece of metal, I am shaving every part. Like it's an arduous amount of work that goes into getting to this place where you can just experience it as a totality. But I think that I've like, some part of me wanted to be that kind of like craftsman. But at the same time, I also thoroughly enjoy the more the side of making that has to do with like being in the flow state in that moment of bringing these parts and things together. So it's like not necessarily a challenge, it's more like something that I've like reveled in, and I've given myself the opportunity, the wonderful opportunity to like spend my days like navigating between these, in part just to like excite all these different parts of my brain, from like what I can technically do with my hands as a craftsman to what I can technically do as a technologist and someone who's working with computers and all these different elements, to like an artist who is like working with form and shape, to a composer that's working with like sound and experience. And that all these different things are challenging, but like it's been very intentional. Like I could have just been a painter, and not to put painters down because I love them, but at the same time, there's a reason why that is not the end art form. And that like created this challenge in a beautiful way, not in a negative way, of like taking all these different things that I'm interested in and that I might have to gain the ability to do, and in order to create this like wildly strange hybrid thing and birth it into the world. And so when you say like what's the most challenging thing, I don't look at that in any way as like as a negative or a detractor, but rather like this project was designed to be challenging. Like it's kind of like if there was no challenge, it's the reason why it's very hard to rip off, because who else in the world does this? Like who would hand make all these ridiculous little parts, and figure out how to like, create physical computing systems in order to trigger them and sequence it. Like it's so ridiculous that it's part of the beauty and part of what makes it like a very unique ownership and special in the world. And I also find that like, and I think John has to do this too, is training your mind and your skills to be able to do this array of things is also a very unique thing, because we're in a world where we are using technology all the time very seamlessly. And there is a sense of like making tech for tech's sake. But the artist always looks at it like everything is an art material. Everything is an art supply. So taking these kind of tools that we have at our hands and then figuring out like what is the artistic interpretation of them is like a really great crossroads that both John and I can fit into, which is one of the reasons why I think we appreciate each other a lot. But also it makes what we do that much more like fun and unique and uncharted.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's a really beautiful way to put it, in the sense that it's a challenge, but not in the negative sense in the slightest. I mean, it's truly really become my life's work, because I do thoroughly enjoy the pursuit of both sides of it, and it is truly unique. And there isn't a lot of utility in the world for displays in this form factor, beyond right now, kind of these, the long digital reflecting ponds that people can meditate on as they're listening to this, to a sonic kinetic sculpture. So that it's been, yeah, a wonderful journey. And, Aaron's been a huge influence in really leading me to that joy, as well as I leaned more and more into my personal art practice, and was just encouraged to keep going, keep experimenting, keep just, make the thing and then spend the time with it, kind of like do the craftsmanship and then come back to it and visit it from an artistic standpoint. And so this collaboration's just been really wonderful. It started when I guess I moved to New York in early 2017, and it continues to this day. And yeah, I'm really grateful for the encouragement.
I would say you both are the master of what you do, and that's why you are one of a kind. I understand you both have worked in the Burning Man events. How was the first experience?
I mean, Burning Man's a lot of fun. And it's at this point, it's much more than an event that's been going on for so long, and it's also had many different lives and different histories and dimensions, as both John and I have had different lives and histories and dimension, and we've met it at different points of our life. And I think Burning Man, more than anything, from my point of view, was really about having a blank canvas that you're allowed to like take risks with, and something that you also were like knowing that you're doing this for your community, and to share something with your community. And so it's been really valuable throughout the years, and saying, like, both John and I, we're like, I first went in 95, that's a long time ago. Things are very different from that. And Burning Man's kind of its own can of worms for for people that are really into it. But more than anything, I think that it was still is a very liberating event that allows you to have like a real expanded canvas, a lot of freedom to explore what you think you could creatively offer to your community. And I think it remains that to this day. And both of us have done a lot of different things there. John's helped me with Gamelatron a few times there, and he's a heavy machinery operator and has like an amazing community that stays together well beyond Burning Man. And, he's like a catalyst for a lot of the different networks that we've grown, artistic networks and friend networks over the last decades.
Yeah, that's a really great way to summarize. I definitely would not be who I am today without the event Burning Man that came into my life in 1998. And then I went for half my life. Literally, I went 21 out of 42 years on the planet. Didn't miss a single year until I took a year off in 2019. Then, of course, the pandemic, stopped the event from happening for a couple of years. But my sort of relationship to the event kept changing, almost every other year. Different opportunities unfolded, different people came into my life. I was able to really lean into the community aspects of, building large art, helping out other artists really with their journey, infusing technology into various art projects. And then, as Aaron mentioned, I eventually decided to go down this path of sort of a white glove but blue collar relationship, where I was kind of doing white glove art handling but driving blue collar, very large machines for the heavy equipment team. So I started working for the event to help produce the event, and that allowed me to touch, dozens, if not hundreds, of art pieces over the years, especially this last decade of my involvement with the event. I really decided to pay it forward because it changed my life as a young 20-something-year-old, and then it was profound. It was a profound change, and I wanted to enable that for other people so they could start going through their evolution and their changes, because I think that's really a large part of what that event has to offer is change and evolution. And otherwise, it would just be the same old thing and the same old party, and it's definitely not that. And it's because people grow up with the event and then hopefully pay it forward.
Please share what and where your next project is.
And today,
Any day.
well, I mean, we have a couple of different things going on. We do have John and I are working on a private commission for a home in San Francisco, like a big penthouse, beautiful views, and it's a Gamelatron that is been designed specifically for this kind of open concept penthouse. And after I install that, John is designing a series of interactive light sculptures that will be kind of driven by the sound. So he'll take the data that becomes my compositions and then reinterpret it as these light pulsations. And that's something we're working on just next week. I'm going to get the Gamelatron in, and then the lights will come after. But probably the next real public thing is there's a space called Huron Arts. It's an art gallery and an art center in Soma in San Francisco, and we're going to install a large scale Gamelatron and a series of John's light sculptures that are all interconnected with each other. And we've also invited a couple other artists working in a similar vein under a similar concept. So other artists that make light-based artworks, and they're also going to heed the challenge of taking the data that becomes my music and reinterpret that within their light-based sculptures. And so that will be running December, January into February for like kind of time-ticketed experiences. At Huron Arts in South Market, San Francisco.
I guess, John, you're going to be working a lot on the LED display there.
Yep. I'm going to be very busy for the next month. And I also have another project in my studio at the moment, which is doing the lighting design and sequencing for an amazing artist who's a Stanford design professor named John Edmark. And that was a commission from an overseas client, and 2 sculptures are going to be shipping out in November to go to this beautiful restaurant in Dubai. And so that's yet another project that is kind of on the horizon, and another lovely collaboration. But yeah, Huron Arts, the Resonance and Light is the name of the group show that we're having at Huron Arts in December and January. And so yeah, Resonance and Light is really just a wonderful passion project that I not only kind of conceived and produced, but also I'm participating as an artist. And it's just sort of been wonderful to bring together like-minded artists that have a passion for light and want to reinterpret the resonance of the gongs in their light medium. And it's just been a delight. We did it last year as well. Last winter, we kind of and this year's going to be new artists, new cohort, a couple new artists, a couple returning artists, but it's all going to be new projects, except for the main anchor of the Gamelatron and the panels that you saw. So,
is that the free event where people have to purchase tickets to go?
So last year we did it as a donation-based experience, and we did it in very small groups, partially because of the ongoing pandemic, and Omicron was kind of just coming into, well, maybe just kind of tapering down a little bit as we opened the show last year. But still, we want the experience to be very intimate. We want small groups to come and listen and relax and have that parasympathetic connection with the sound and the lights, and just really enjoy it in a smaller group. So I think this year we're going to shift slightly away from the donation-based model and go to a more ticketed event, but it's not like a ride where you buy the ticket, you go in, you come out the other side, and it's finished. It's still going to be a kind of casual drop-in experience, but we're going to need to really limit the number of people and the number of, I guess, kind of chairs in the room, if you will, for people to experience things. So we're still dialing that in a little bit, but there will be tickets online and a schedule, and people can kind of reserve their listening slots.
What we learned from last time was it was definitely like a really good, like a couple of friends or just like an awesome date experience where you really are, what is it, about 5,000 square feet here on Arts?
Yeah.
But it's mostly one big open room, and you are surrounded by different gongs and sound making things, and it's a dark environment. And then you have these different light sculptures that are reacting to those sounds, like literally overhead, around you on all sides, in corners, things like that. And so you can kind of like float throughout the space to get different interpretations. Yeah, it's just like a really what's the best way? I want to say it's cozy. It's like will stimulate your mind, but it's also something which like I find it incredibly like relaxing as well. It's a really nice balanced experience where it's not too showy, but it's also has like a lot of soul, and you can kind of determine how long you want to be in there. I mean, we're staggering people coming in so that it doesn't, that everyone has a pretty intimate experience rather than doing parties or big events where, you know, it's you might lose the artwork in the social atmosphere. But definitely, I think it's something it'd be a lot of fun to experience with like a couple friends.
Sounds great. And I have one last question for you too. So how will people get in touch with you, interested in your products?
Well, Gamelatron's pretty easy to find. If you just know how to write that word, Gamelatron, it's like game Tron. So, that's the handle at Instagram or Facebook or something. But probably the easiest way is just through the website, gamelatron.com. There's like an email form on there. I definitely encourage people to just like acquaint themselves with, like the archive or a variety of the different things that we've done before. Usually when people contact me, it's because they've seen one or two pieces, and sometimes don't realize like the range of different work from indoors or outdoors and really huge to smaller and things like that. So a lot of times going to the website or looking through the Instagram feed gives you like a wider range of possibilities. And then that starts the daydream of like what might work best in your life. And then we start a conversation from there.
How about you, John?
Yeah, same thing. Maybe going to the website for LumiGeek. That is the kind of bespoke software and hardware consultancy that me and my business partner have had since, I believe, 2013. The site's a little bit out of date at the moment, but it gives people a good idea of the type of projects that we've worked on and collaborated on with a variety of artists, usually a very light-focused, LED-focused collaborations, but sometimes more just pure technology. And so that's a good place to see what I've done in the past. And pretty soon there will be a new website in the world that's a little bit more specific to my current practice and my evolving work in the studio here.
I will definitely link both website informations to the audience. And I really appreciate you both today and for this out of world experience.
Well, thank you for sharing it with people.
Absolutely. It was an absolute pleasure, and it was wonderful to host you both here in my studio in Portola Valley and in my home in Redwood City. So you've seen these two Gamelatrons, and hopefully you'll come to Heron Arts as well and experiencing everything there in December.
I will definitely go there and bring my friends as well.
Excellent. Okay.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right.
Here is a piece of a Gamelatron music. Hope you enjoyed it.